This session is covered under CCU, 2 RDCCU. So we'll be sharing an opening passcode shortly, and there will be a closing passcode towards the end of the program. A feedback form will be shared with you, and you need to fill the feedback form and enter the passcodes if you want your CCUs to be processed. Okay, with this brief introduction, I hand over to Vijay to set the context before handing it over to Bob.
Thank you so much, Natarajan, and welcome once again, Bob. Welcome, Ajit, again from IGL. It's such a pleasure to have both of you here today. So as Natarajan said, to just set a bit of context, I was just sharing with Bob in the waiting room that I tried to give my perspective on generative leadership, but I think it's best we don't talk on topics we are not completely hands-on or do not have much of an idea of. So I'm going to refrain from that. And anyway, I think we have a power-packed hour and 45 minutes, I would think, plus minus, to really deep dive into what seems certainly an exciting topic. I can, of course, talk a little bit about leadership because that is one of my, I would say, areas that I enjoy a lot. And I think most of us coaches who are here today, largely a lot of us work in the space of leadership coaching. So I think we can all relate to that. And before I talk about, how this workshop came about, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the GROW L&D workshops really stand for in the chapter. So at ICF Chennai, one of our pillars of the work we do is to grow coaches. And I think growing coaches is such a vast thing by itself because it's inside out. So there's a little bit of growth outside, which is business, coaching practice, etc. So we run sessions which help that. But I think the growth is also quite internal as to how can we be good coaches, great coaches, really build on our skills and competencies. And I think the GROW L&D webinar series really used to focus on that. But this year, we, Natarajan, myself, and a couple of others sat together and said, hey, how can we really elevate this to the next level? And that's when we said there are some topics which require, I think, a lot more time, a lot more attention, and if I may, a lot more depth, which you really cannot get to in a 90-minute session. So that's how, this thing about the GROW L&D workshops came about, which are like 2-hour length sessions where, we can take it easy. The learning can be nice and easy. The learning can be in depth. And of course, we would do not too many of these workshops because there's a lot of effort, right from identifying the right topic to finding the resource facilitator who will come and partner with us, etc. So we launched our first one earlier this year. And that was really well received and people loved that format. So we said, okay, we must wrap up 2022 with another one from the series. And that's how this workshop came about. Now, separately, we've been having conversations with Ajit, who is the face of IGL here in India and in Chennai. And thanks to our good friend, Mr. PMC, from ICF Chennai, who kind of got this conversation. We said, how can we explore a partnership with IGL? And that's when we said a good place to start thinking about a partnership is to really understand this work because it is quite interesting, as I said, and certainly these words, the meaning, and a good life, these are, I think, so relevant, and I'm for sure very curious to know what exactly they mean in the context of coaching. So IGL, Ajit, Samir, and of course now Bob have been very generous to run this workshop for us, as a very special gesture and offering to all the community of ICF Chennai, and not necessarily our members and associates, for all our GROW L&D workshops, which are run at absolutely no cost. We usually invite coaches from all over the world to come and participate because with that kind of learning, I think that kind of diversity learning is going to be richer and deeper. So this is really the context of why GROW L&D workshop, why IGL, and I think you probably have your answers to why leadership. I'm not going to talk about why generative leadership. So I think I've put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And with that, handing over to you, Bob, and as you take us, 50 odd people here today on an exciting journey into the world of generative leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank ICF Chennai chapter for inviting me. And my colleague Samir Dua, who's the founder of IGL India and IGL Asia and IGL UK, by the way. And unfortunately, he couldn't make it to join with us here. So you get me, you get the B team here instead. So I want to invite you, if you can, to turn on your cameras, because I'd prefer that we have a conversation rather than a remote presentation. And with that, I'm going to challenge you to our first leadership practice. It's called a high 10. Give me a high 10. And what are we doing here? We're connecting. I want you to actually connect with the people here, not just lean back and watch the program. So the topic here, generative leadership coaching. And in our experience, the generative leadership tradition that I've been involved in is now in its 41st year. One of the things that's unique about the generative leadership, as we have developed it over the years, is it has a long history and it reaches back intellectually into very deep roots that I'm going to share with you. But our conversation today is not just a description of generative leadership. I want us to experience generative leadership. So we have to do some context setting to shape how we're going to look at life, how we're going to look at action. And what makes the generative leadership tradition unique, as far as I can tell, in the world, because there's so many stories now about leadership, hundreds, I'm told, hundreds of frameworks for leadership, and probably as many or more for coaching. But what we're going to do is take a deep dive into the question, what is leadership? And what is coaching? And in our tradition, we have learned in our Western culture, in our industrial culture, that people are very action-oriented. They want to know how. But the question how is the wrong question to start with. You need to know what you're dealing with before you can answer how. And so we're going to be in the context of exploring what is leadership and what is coaching. To do that, we have to explore what is a human being. And this is a crucial aspect of the context of generative leadership, because the common sense in our industrialized culture is that action is best done when we imitate machines. And so much of leadership out there in the world is about making the organization a better machine. And just look at company departments. How do they think about people? Well, why do they call their department concerning people human resources? So all of a sudden, we're using a metaphor that changes the human being to a resource. And so we're going to be regrounding ourselves in our humanity and our life. And what does that mean about our conversation today, our exploration of generative leadership? I invite you to see this not as a informational presentation about something called generative leadership. This conversation is actually about you. I want you to see yourself, see your humanity as we go into our questions. And what is the focus of generative leadership? Where did it come from? It started with the question, what is action? And how do you produce results? That is the pragmatic concern of companies, of organizations, of leaders. But as I said, we have a choice of many different contexts of how we're going to answer that question. The common sense of our culture about action is usually it's about doing, about movement. It's about getting things done. But where does that come from? And what happens to the human being as they do it? And what is being lost when we're simply being busy? How are we doing? You with me? Hello?
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
So I invite you to these questions for you and what you can make of it for yourself. So I'm going to challenge you with another leadership practice. Are you up to it? You think you can handle the leadership? I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath and actually relax on the exhale. And why do I do this? This may be the most important leadership practice of all. When we are in tension, we tend to go to our heads, we get tense, and we're actually disconnected from the moment. When the challenge is greatest, when we're triggered the most, that's the most important time to be present, to stay with the situation. And it's also crucial for our learning, because one way to miss the opportunity for the learning we're going to be doing is to be in your head, or to be trying to fit what we're talking about into what you already know. And so when I ask you to take a deep breath, which I will, I'm going to ask you to get out of your head, relax on the exhale, and open to the moment. Let's do it again. Take a deep breath and actually become present and open rather than in some assessment of the moment. Very crucial leadership practice. Okay, so I'm going to use some images. I'm going to share my screen to help with our journey. And I'm not going to see you much when I put the. So let's do high 10 again. I want to make sure I'm connected before we. Fantastic. Okay, all right, here we go. We're going to have a story here. And here we go. This image is the metaphor of cultivating a garden. In our life, we want to cultivate our life. We want to cultivate our work. If you are a leader with your team, or you own a company, or as many of your clients do, we want to connect to the context of life, of cultivating and producing fruit, rather than being the machine that has to become more efficient. And so, to give you a little background on IGL, I founded the organization in 1993, although I had been doing research in the field since 1981. In 1998, we started offering public leadership programs. The interim was all consulting in companies. We were bringing what we were learning from the generative perspective in the world of organizations to public programs. 2008, we began to offer coaching from the generative leadership framework. And the programs are called Coaching Excellence in Organizations. 2012, 19, 20, we have founded affiliate organizations around the world. And we currently have thousands of graduates from our programs, which are 1 to 3 years, depending how ambitious people are. Let's begin. Let's begin with this context setting to bring leadership and coaching back into the context of its part of our life. Life is a journey. It's a powerful metaphor. It allows us to know where we are, where we're going. And sometimes when you're coaching, the challenge is people don't know they're on a journey, or they don't know where they are, or they don't know where they're going. And so we want to help people deal with the learning and leadership journey, because you can't be in the leadership journey without being on the learning journey. And here we begin to understand what's fundamental to our being a human being that begins to inform these journeys. One is the human being is always here, going there, depending, whatever your story is about that. So I have a question for you right now. What's your here? Where are you in your life? In your life journey, your leadership journey, your coaching journey? Where is here now for you? And where is there? Where are you going? It's a very powerful framework for questions. What's your here and where are you going? And why are you going there? And here's one of the challenges of leadership and coaching. There's no right answer to these questions. The big questions, who are you? Where are you going in life? Why are you going there? Have no right answer. They only present possibilities for your choice. So this is often what we find in the leadership world. When people are not in these questions, they're usually overwhelmed and busy. But if they have those questions, then it can begin to inform what is it they're trying to create with their leadership. And so on this journey, we come from a past, we're in action, and we want to produce some kind of outcomes. And as coaches, that's going to be the framework you're going to find your clients, particularly in the leadership, team, and organizational story. What are we doing to produce what outcomes? And this journey that I've been on now for 41 years, we have learned enough from many disciplines to make the claim in IGL that leadership and coaching in organizations are professions. They are fields in which there is enough clarity about what the skills are and how to learn them that we can begin to operate at a professional standard. What is a professional standard? To be a profession in our interpretation, professional is to make and fulfill promises. Many people think being a professional is getting paid, but that's not enough. To be respected as a professional, you have to be able to make and fulfill promises that people care about and satisfy customers. And this in itself begins to set a standard for what generative coaching is all about. So, what is this challenge of leadership that we're seeing in the world today? There's so much change going on. There's breakdowns in organizations. This may be what your client organization or your client team looks like. They're trying to get somewhere and they're having problems. And an example of these leadership challenges are the work of the Gallup organization. Gallup has been doing millions of surveys, and they continue to do it every year. And they invented the distinction of employee engagement. Are your employees engaged? And they have associated employee engagement with the performance of the organization. But they find in the US that 69% of employees are disengaged. What a huge waste. In other countries, that number tends to be higher. And if you look at the surveys that they do, they have 12 questions. 10 of the questions are about conversations. So one of the things we're going to discover on this journey is the unavoidable challenge and opportunity and power of conversations. What's missing when we have employee engagement issues are conversations. That's not an employee problem. That's a leadership problem. And so let's begin to look into that world. And so we look out into the world, and there are some exemplars that we consider to be really good examples of leadership, but they're rare. we have the case studies. They write books. It's very popular. In fact, leadership is kind of a cult of personality right now. You want to learn about leadership? You read books by people who say, I had a great leadership career. Let me give you my wisdom. That's actually part of the problem. We don't seem to have a more fundamental discipline of what leadership is, that we're still learning. And that's to say that these leaders are providing value with their insights, but it's also a demonstration of we're missing something. And what are we missing? Leadership is still a blind spot in our culture. There's something we don't see about it. If we go to the history of medicine, for example, we can look back and say there were times that we didn't know germs existed. It was a blind spot. And then there was a new illumination, a new discovery, and all of a sudden germs became part of the common sense. And germs were not something to learn about as concepts. The discovery of germs led to new practices that changed results. And so that's the framework we have for leadership. The study we've done of leadership is, where are the blind spots? How do we illuminate them so people can take new practices? And the leadership journey for your clients begins in our generative perspective with, what are their blindnesses? What is it they don't even see? Usually you find people in organizations working very hard, often exhausted, and they don't even see some of the actions they could be taking to be more effective or to have a healthier organization. So if blindness is our issue, we need new eyes. And the way we talk about that in our generative work is, what you see has to do with the observer you are. You do not see the world. You see what you are structured to see of the world. So, for example, if we look at professions, a physician, through their learning and their practice, sees different bodies than I see. An architect would see my home, my house, with different eyes. They would see things that I don't see. They would have different assessments. They would have different possibilities. They would understand different actions that don't even exist for me. And so this is true for our clients. They see what they see and they're blind to what they're blind to, but it's also true for us as coaches. We see what we see and we may be blind. And so one of the questions of generative leadership over the years has been, what are the blind spots of leadership? What are the blind spots of coaching? I'm actually working on a book right now called The 7 Blind Spots of Leadership, in which we over the 40 years that we've been working on this, we can say, these are the blind spots of our culture. We don't even know what action is. We don't have a generative interpretation of learning. We're not very generative with the capacity to choose and more. That's another whole conversation we could have at some moment. So when we are an observer, what we can see shapes what actions we can take. When we are blind, we are unaware. Blindness is not the case of not knowing. To not know something is to be ignorant, but to be blind isn't that you don't know something, it doesn't even exist for you. You're not aware of it. So by becoming a new observer, for example, one of the examples I use is the observer of being a chef, right? What is the world of the chef? What would they see if they walked into my kitchen? The observer that I am when I walk into the kitchen is cans and can openers. That's all I've got in the world of the kitchen. But this asks a question of us. What is the effective observer of a leader? What is the effective observer of a coach, of a leader? And when we have our repertoire of actions that are available to us based on the observer we get results. This framework, OAR, has been used for many, many years by the Newfield Ontological Coaching School. One of my friends was the founder of that, Julio Alaya. And what we found in working with this over the years, this isn't enough because it implies that if you inform people to see things that they haven't been aware of before, that they will take new action and new results. Sometimes they won't, because it's not enough to have new concepts. You have to become a new actor. You have to build the embodied skill, the embodiment to perform. A very simple example is when we deal with people experiencing the breakdown of overwhelm, we always see that they say yes too much. And they need to learn a new practice called saying no. And they understand the concept. They nod their yes, I need to say no. And then they go back to their life and they keep on saying yes, because they don't have the body for the performance yet. Concepts are not enough. We have to learn the emotional strength, the actual, and in order to learn, we have to unlearn our old habits. This is very challenging. In my 40 years in this discipline, I've found that understanding what leadership is, so that it can be clear and effective, has not been as big of a challenge as how do people learn. Because our culture has tended to have us learn as concepts. Oh, I understand the concept. Oh, I have the model. Oh, I have the procedure. But you only develop skill when you develop the body of performance. So, what is the structure? What is it we need to learn? What is this new observer we're looking for? This is a picture of the DNA helix. DNA is the foundational core in which every living thing on our planet is created. And it's only composed of 4 elements. This is amazing. 4 basic elements can come together and create living things, including us. And so this is the power of structure. One of the things we've learned over the years is we need to have the basic elements that can then deal with all the variations and complexities that we see in the world. The key question, as I mentioned before, is what are we dealing with? Because if we don't have the right answer to what, our answer to how is going to be off. For example, if our answer to what action is movement, then to get more results, we do more movement. But that's a very, very limited perspective, and it doesn't produce significant results. So let's look together. What happens in leadership? What do we see when we see leadership going on? Well, we see people interacting with other people. Here we are, back to people. As a result of those interactions, actions are taken and results produced. Seems pretty simple. If we want new results, we need to have new leadership interactions that will produce new actions and new results. Now we're getting a little more focus here. What are those leadership interactions? That's our question. If we don't know what leaders do, then we don't know what leadership is. So we're going to explore what are the leadership interactions that then produce actions and results in your individual life, in your leadership, in your team, in your organization, in your community, in your nation. The fundamentals, DNA, the DNA of action produces all of that. But we also need to explore the question, what is action? It's not, the common sense we have isn't powerful enough in our experience if we stay with the old interpretation of action. So we're going to relook at what action is. And we also need to answer the question, what is a human being? Because that's what's involved. Now, this question of what is a human being, I remember decades ago when I would bring up that question because I knew it was important, but I was shy about it, right? That the reaction I knew I was getting from business audiences when I said, what is a human being is an important question would be, okay, Bob's going philosophical here, is he's going woo-woo. We need to get, I'll wait till he's through with that so we can get to the real stuff. But what is a human being may be our most important question. Because if we don't know what it is, how can we act effectively with ourselves or other people if they're just human resources, for example? So we're going to explore that question as well. So we've asked the question, what is leadership? What are leadership interactions? What is action? What is a human being? What kind of answers do we want? And here's where the word generative gets defined. What is a generative answer to these questions? Generative answers are about actions. Leadership, action, even the human being. The human being can be defined by what the human being does. But these actions have to be physically observable. We have to be able to see them. We have to be able to do them, learn them, and they have to produce the desired outcome. Why is this so important? Because so much of the leadership literature and even some coaching literature can be what we call descriptive. Okay, produce some trust. Well, how do you do that? How do you physically produce trust? Not just have a description about it. And so we're going to unpack that. That's part of what makes the generative tradition, I think, unique out there, is we go down to the physical execution, not only of an act like producing trust, but that is a unique set of actions for every individual. So let's take a look here. We're doing context here. We're going to start getting into some things we can exercise with. So we've come up with, over the last 40 years, what we call the anatomy of action. I love the word anatomy because it means we're dealing with something alive. So we're dealing with actions produces outcome. This is kind of the common sense of our culture. And it can be made mechanical very, very easily. You want outcomes, you take action. It's obvious, right? But if you go back hundreds of years in the history of Europe, for example, there was a time when this was not the common sense. Outcomes were the will of God. That was the most powerful explanation people have. So we live in an era here where action produces outcomes, but we need to know what actions are. This is, everybody take a deep breath. This is a time to take a deep breath. I want you to really open to this. This is a new answer to the question, what is action? I ran into this for the first time in 1981. And I was in a workshop, and as part of the workshop, they asked the question, what is action? And my first reaction was, oh, I don't think I'm going to pass this quiz. I didn't read the chapter last night. And then I stopped and said, at that time, I was a program manager in Silicon Valley. I was managing 250 engineers. And I said, I'm a smart guy. I'm doing stuff in the world. I can come up with a good answer to what is action. And that was my moment of awakening. That is the first time that I recall that I was aware of my blindness. Not only my blindness, but the blindness of our culture, because I knew that everybody else in the room at that workshop was having a similar conversation. You just asked a question that we don't ask. What is action? And what that does is reveal context. Take another deep breath. This is another one I want you to really. The power of changing people into new observers and actors is not giving them new content. It's changing their context. It's changing how they actually see the world, how they experience it, how they feel it. And this happens through learning. Sounds extraordinary, but we do it all the time. And so at that experience I had of awakening to what is action, they came up with this answer that has been so powerful in my experience. They said, action is commitment. To commit to something is an act. And commitment then shapes all the activity that happens afterwards. And where does commitment come from? It comes from conversations. Commitments are made in conversation. If you say, Bob, will you pass the salt? That's a conversation. And it produces action. And the same structure of that statement, will you pass the salt, could be seen in the conversation saying, hey, I want you to be my partner, and we're writing a business plan for $1 billion business unit. Same foundational, the DNA of conversation is the same. And so, as we're on our leadership and learning journey here, we're saying something very important. All results come from prior conversations. All of them. The good ones, the bad ones, the so-so ones. They come from conversations we have. They come from conversations we don't have. They come from conversations we do well and conversations we do poorly. And we have just identified the domain of leadership, that all outcomes come from conversations. This is why when we see an effective leader, we see them moving well in interactions that we'll call conversations. And conversation is not simply the use of words to pass information. Conversation is a full body experience that we'll unpack here a bit more. So I also want to point out that our culture, in its how orientation, tends to be focused on action as something you do externally to your body. You do stuff, you produce stuff. But where's the commitment? It's inside you. So all of a sudden, we have changed the context that the foundation of action and results comes from inside of people. And now we begin to see the challenge and the power of effective leadership and effective coaching. If you don't change the conversations of a coachee, if you don't change the commitments of a coachee, if you don't change the body of a coachee, they won't produce new outcomes. They may have new concepts. They may be able to talk about stuff descriptively, but they won't be able to generate more effective results. And so I'm going to ask you right now to think about a challenging situation that may be in your life or in your coaching, maybe with a client or a client organization. I'll take credit for exciting somebody. And so think of a situation where there's a breakdown, a dissatisfaction, a problem. What's the conversations that led to that happening? What are the missing conversations that would have produced the different results? What are the conversations that have to happen to intervene and shift things? And you'll see that's your access to action. But we need to learn how to have action conversations. So I'm going to stop here, and my understanding is we can do some breakouts. Let's do a breakout for groups of 3 for 6 minutes. Have you chew on this conversational perspective. This is one of the most powerful principles of generative leadership. Everything is shaped from conversation. Some of those conversations you may have had decades ago, but in my 40 plus years, I've never had a situation brought to me where we couldn't identify the generating conversations. And so if we begin to look there, it's not only to understand why we are where we are, it's also going to reveal what new conversations we need to have to change things. So let's have you do a breakout, chew on the conversational perspective or what's happening for you in the talk so far. We'll come back, take a few questions, and then we're going to start continuing on our journey. Are we ready to rock and roll? Anybody have a burning bush question?
Yeah, I have a question, Bob, for you.
Sure. Great.
I'm a leadership coach and I coach leaders. And I was a leader myself. Like you're leading 250 people in Silicon Valley. I did that in India, right, for many years. Yeah. In the slide which you showed, I loved everything about what you said about conversations, commitment, actions, and outcomes. But I was wanting to hear from you, what about the sense of purpose in a leader? There are a lot of leaders who have conversations.
Yes.
A lot of bad leaders or leaders who don't deliver good results have great conversations, great commitment, produces actions in people, they mobilize others to act and produces results, but not very good results. So what about the sense of purpose which comes, should it come ahead of the conversations for a leader, a desire or a passion or an ambition or a meaning, and which drives the conversations with people? That's my question to you.
Perfect. You've actually set up the next step of the journey. where I'll give you the answer and we're going to unpack it more.
Okay.
Which is the anatomy is not complete yet.
Okay.
Now that we see conversations are important, what is behind the conversation is what
you're going to cover it. Then I will not break the egg before we are ready.
Okay.
I'll wait for the suspense. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I'll go there and you can come back if I don't answer the question well for what makes that happen. Thank you for that. Anyone else have a question? Are we? Yes, please. Chitra.
I had a comment. In fact, it is fantastic that you spoke about how, a conversation also, there's something that precedes it, and that's a conversation. An action is preceded by a conversation. And I was thinking about how when you announced 6 minutes for the breakout room, the conversation that I had was really how. And it was so interesting that 6 minutes was just enough. And it was really an observation. And you said, be an observer, an observation of that thought, of that 6 minutes and what happened just for that small miniature thing that emerged in the moment.
Beautiful. What a good example. When we begin to unpack the world of conversation, one of the things we're going to discover is a perspective called speech acts. these refer to the actual acts in listening of commitment. And one of the powerful speech acts is assessment, opinion. And when we are self-aware, when we begin to observe our mind, most of what's going on are opinions. I like it, I don't like it, I'm hungry, I'm not sure this is going well, whatever it is. And the challenge we have is, given this flow of assessments, which ones are relevant for the purpose that Raghraman was speaking of, and which ones are ones we're willing to commit to? And that's a different question. So thank you. It's a great example. Haifa.
I have
Yes, thank you for this interesting session. And I would just like to add that our leader, the Prophet, peace be upon him, as a Muslim, he started with conversation, which really leads to commitment. And then, from there, the action was produced by the people around him. So I think really, the conversation, the tone of the conversation, the tone of the voice may make really great impact on the other people. So
Beautiful.
it's just, a point that I would just love to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would love for us to go from this concept to the experience of it. How do you listen to commitment? How do you feel commitment? Are you willing to dive into an experience here?
Yes, of course, commitment. Oh, is it for me or for someone else? You are asking in general.
The biggest challenge for assessing commitment is the commitment of others. It can be a challenge to know our own commitment. That's usually just confusion. But when you're trying to coordinate action and you ask someone to do something and they say yes, what does it mean?
That they are doing it.
We live in the mistaken interpretation that the word has the meaning and the word doesn't have the meaning. So let's do an exercise. This one will be, can we do pairs instead of 3? Okay, so we're gonna do pairs. Ajit, where are you?
I'm here.
Are you there? Okay. So we're going to demonstrate an exercise that everybody gets to do, because we want them to have the experience of being aware of commitment, of listening for commitment, of feeling it in their body and in the body of another person. This is a foundational skill in generative leadership. And so we're going to do an exercise. It's fun. We're going to have fun with this. Here's the game we're going to play. The rule is you only get to say 2 words. The words are, I will. No other words, no other talking. That's it. And we're going to be a pair. There's an A and a B. I'll be A, I'll go first. And I'm going to say I will. And then Ajit will have his turn. He will say I will. But here's the game. Every time it's said, it has to mean something different than any time it was said before. Does this make sense? Okay, Ajit, let's you and I play here. So I'm going to start. I will.
I will.
I will.
Oh, I will.
I will.
I will. I will.
I will.
I will.
Okay, everybody get the idea? This is not a challenge for your performance. This is an exercise to see that you can listen for commitment, and it's not in the words. It's beyond the words. This is a profound exercise in listening. So pair up, go back and forth, 10 different meanings, and then I want you to have a short chat about what is it that created the meaning if it wasn't the words? What is it you are paying attention to? Now we see we're going past concepts of generative leadership to the practice. So let's go 5 minutes, and then we'll check in from the experience. Have fun. A couple of shares. What did
just
you?
a quick question, Bob. Are you really cheating? Is it 6 minutes or just 2 minutes?
Oh, there you go. That
It was 5 minutes. It was 5 minutes.
it's amazing how we get so engaged in the conversation. But let me have a couple of reports. What did you learn? What did you see about listening for commitment, seeing the future that's coming from the conversation that's not defined by the words? Anybody?
Yeah,
Share.
I think I'll go there. And what we were trying to do, Bob, in that is, it's not only the words, but the tonality, the tone with which you say. And as we progress into the exercise, beyond even the tone, we were trying to gauge the emotion. And though we should not be judgmental, we are trying to assess how, okay, for want of a better word, committed they are. Will they do what they say? And how are they responding? In fact, in one of my statements, I tried to quell the doubt of my partner. I imagine that they don't believe that when I say I will, then I went and said I will. You know.
Exactly.
So when we expanded this to face-to-face conversation, you look at the body language, you look at the eye movements. The body doesn't lie. Therefore, you look at the body language, tonality, the tone, and in what I call is the wholesome listening. That's what tells us about. So if we are able to perfect that, half the time you can gauge the commitment even without looking at the person.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. One of the principles we've learned in this exploration is your body is always talking louder than your mouth. If we're not aware of how to listen to the body, we can make agreements that are not trustworthy. This was a big deal for me when I first learned this, because I actually thought the words were the agreement. And when I began to listen here, I began to be able, this was in Silicon Valley when my story was that conversations turned out to be very important because my company was failing. My company was losing sales and people were leaving the company. It was horrible. And I was given this job of being a program manager. I'd never done the job before. And I said, how do I do this job? How do I not only do a new job I've never done before, but my job is to turn around the company? Because they had not been able to get a product out the door for 2.5 years. And I was in charge of the group that had to get the product done. And so this experience in the workshop of listen for the commitment, I went back to work listening for commitment in every conversation. That was my practice. Every conversation, I'd say, time to listen. Time to listen. What's going to happen out of this conversation? And I began to get skill of listening to the future coming, to what was really going to happen, separate from the words. Now, that didn't make me a policeman, because all I was looking for was honesty. And so when I listened to people and I said, oh, you don't sound sure, I would simply have a conversation saying, well, you don't sound sure. Let's make sure that we're on solid ground here. We both want to succeed here. And it allowed me to have these new conversations. As a result of that, we wound up in a 6-month phase delivering all the products of the company on time, on budget, 10 times higher quality than had ever been achieved before. That's why I'm here. I had that early experience. Conversations change everything, from a very negative situation to a successful one. This makes sense, everybody? That's why this exercise is so important. You listen not only with your ears, but you listen with your body. You listen with your feeling and saying, if the body's not feeling on solid ground, there's a missing conversation. And that's where we begin to learn. And this is not only true for our leadership, but this is also how we coach our coachees. What is their commitment? And also how we coach the leader to be a new listener. So let me go back to Raghuraman's question. And let's go to the question of purpose. What is the purpose? And I'm going to give you something we have found that is fundamental and physical, the foundation of purpose. It's called care. It's the best word we've come up with to describe this aspect. What do you care about?
Yeah, that's right.
And so if you're going to take action and you care about it, you're going to be fully engaged, fully committed, really going. And if you don't care about it, you're going to go through the motions.
Yeah.
And when we talk about negative leaders, why are they negative leaders? Because they care about themselves. They care about games. They don't care about the other people. A good leader, people know they care. They care about creating a future for all of us. It's a different care, and it leads to different actions, and it leads to different results. So care, look what we're revealing here. How do we produce action out in the world? We produce it with conversation. And what is the most important part of the conversation? Care and commitment, and it's inside you, and it's inside the other person. What does the effective leader do in conversation? They change people's care and commitment with honest conversation. How are we doing? Beautiful.
Excellent.
And to give place to the word purpose in our framework, there's care, but there's a tragedy about care in that people can be disconnected from their care. They can live in the story of, well, I have to have a job, I have to eat, so I need to sacrifice my life and just work, and that's it. And so what I care about doesn't matter. And so they don't bring care to the work because care has been eliminated. This is why so many organizations are lacking the engagement. We don't care together. One of our important conversations with teams is, what is our shared care? Do we care about the customer? Do we care about excellence? Do we care about learning? Or do we care about leaving work early? And if you want to see people's care, just watch their behavior. You'll see their actions are connected there. So this is the anatomy, and we have something else here. Care is fundamental and unavoidably fundamental to value, satisfaction, and meaning. If someone says to you, here's an outcome, Bob, and it's very valuable, and you don't care about it, it's not valuable to you. You can't have value without care. How do you produce a valuable product? You produce a product that takes care of what people care about. It's not about the product, it's about the care. Satisfaction. People will say, oh, this is a really satisfying outcome. And if you don't care about it, you're not satisfied. And meaning. People will say, oh, this was a very meaningful experience. And if you don't care about it, it has no meaning. Do you see how fundamental care is? And what do you care about is a missing question in our culture. Our education system teaches us sacrifice, focus, do your job, do it well, and work hard. Our young people in school, in my experience, are not asked, what do you care about? Are not told that what you care about matters. And yet it's fundamental to value, satisfaction, meaning, and leadership. And so this takes us to our question that we asked before. What is a human being? What is our answer? What is our generative answer? The first thing I want to point out that's important for our understanding of questions. What is a human being? One action or response people may have is, I don't care about the question. But you know what? They are living an answer to that question. You can't not be. Everybody is living a default answer to the question. So if you don't take it seriously, you don't have the chance to examine, is my question, is my answer to the question, what is a human being, effective for my leadership, for my life, for taking care? That's why leaving human beings as resources is a problem in the context. We leave out our lives. And so, what is a human being? Our generative answer is a creature that cares, a creature that can commit, and a creature that can take care of what they care about through action and through commitment. Purpose is the connector between care and commitment. Purpose is where we say, this is what I care about and I want to commit to. That's the role of purpose. How are we doing?
Perfect.
So let's ask a next step question. How does conversation, commitment, and action work? What is the blind spot of our culture? If we're like fish in water, we don't see the water. We're just in it. We're in conversation all the time. What is it about conversations that produces action, value, satisfaction, and meaning, and conversation that doesn't? There is a thinker named John Austin, who in the 1940s, he was at Oxford in England, made a big discovery. He's the guy who discovered speech acts. He said, everybody thinks language is describing something in the world. Here's a pen, I have the word pen, and I'm referring to this thing in the world. But he said, there's something very interesting about language. There's certain language that's not referring to something in the world. When you make a request, it's not referring to a thing called a request in the world. It's actually an act. When you make a promise, you're not describing a thing in the world. It's an act. And what are they acts of? They are acts of commitment. They create the future. What is it that generates action? What is it that generates teamwork? What is it that generates organizations? Are two speech acts: requests and promises. Now, the name request and promise are categories. There are hundreds of words that show up as requests. If I demand, that's a request. If I beg, that's a request. There are many different ways to make requests, but the category is one person is asking someone else to act. Promises, there are hundreds of words about promises. I will, I commit, I'm, you can count on me, and it doesn't even need to be a particular word. And these are acts of listening. It's not about talking. The effective, generative, action-producing part of language is about producing listening, not about saying the right words. And so this is when we get into leadership as a performance art. So if we look at requests, what are the symptoms when people don't make requests or the requests are missing in the world of action? Action's missing. If you don't ask for it, it may not happen. How many places in your life are you dissatisfied? How many places in your client's organization are they dissatisfied? Have requests been made? And if they have been made, is there ownership on the part of the requester? What happens when the request is missing or it's unclear? There's confusion. It's not clear who's going to do what. There's dissatisfaction, blame, and there's breakdowns happening. So this request and promise are the acts of creating action in the world. The symptoms of a missing promise are similar: missing action, breakdowns, poor quality, lack of accountability, blame and excuses, justifications, and explanation. If you see these conversations are what's going on in a client organizations, there's missing promises. And there's a missing conversation to bring commitment and promises into the way they interact. This is a diagram of the structure of coordination. It's called the conversation for action. Amazing that coordination happens in conversation. And in this structure, an action conversation is always between two people. There is a person who's asking someone else to perform, and they're called a customer. Why? Because their commitment is customer satisfaction. It was a terminology that we adapted from more academic work decades ago. The person who's being asked to perform is called the performer. So how does this work? How does coordination work? If you're going to ask someone else to perform, you need to make a request of some kind. And there are only 4 committed categories of coordinating a response. There are thousands of responses that are uncommitted, but you can say yes, you can say no. You can counteroffer, saying, I won't do what you asked, but I can offer something else. And the 4th one is, I can't answer you now, but I'll get back to you. Those are the moves of coordination. When I did the turnaround in Silicon Valley in my first experience, this was the conversation I learned to have with listening for commitment. And I listened for promises. This is not a technique to force people to promise. I listened for commitment. And sometimes when they would say yes, but it didn't sound like a real yes to me, maybe it was a challenging request, I would say, you can say no, if that's appropriate. You can counteroffer. We can negotiate. I would teach my team to have an honest conversation with, because I wanted to get to a trustworthy promise, not just a yes. And then there's the point where the performer says, I'm done, and the customer says they're satisfied. This is something that is a shape of practice and one of the core foundations. When things are working, this structure is happening well. When things are not working, something's missing or broken in this structure. It's an amazing support for diagnosis, for coaching, and helping leaders. So the road to the future is paved with promises. It's paved with commitment. Now, we just had the experience of conversations where we were listening for commitment and we noticed emotions and body language. And so we have a way to express that in generative leadership. We have SELPH. So what is that about? It's an acronym. Let me explain what's involved here. The S stands for somatics. Somatics is a word that means mind and body together. Not just body, but mind and body. You know, when you change your mind, the body reacts. When the body has a feeling, the mind is affected. So somatics is part of who you are. It's part of yourself. Your emotions and moods are unavoidable. They're going on all the time. L is language. L is the language you're in, the story you're in, the assessments you're in. We tend to be in our context. Our context is a story. And so SEL is a unity. Part of our Western reductionist way of thinking is we separate things. And we just deal with emotions, or we just deal with the body, or we just deal with the language. But they're all affecting each other. And so in generative leadership, we learn through practice how to listen, interact, and coach the self, the somatics, emotions, and language, particularly at the edges of learning where people think they have no choice. For example, some people will react with fear and they say, I can't do that because I'm afraid. Fear is something we can learn to go beyond. Fear is a place of learning, but people don't know they have that choice. Body reactions, they say, well, this is my reaction. I can't, my body reacts and I contract. That's something we can learn, to have a body that can be present in the face of challenges. Now we're beginning to define what leadership is. A certain kind of body and presence, a certain kind of ability to move in the world of emotions, facility in context, in stories, and in acts of commitment and language. P stands for practices, because the SEL that you are has been created by the history of your practices. You are what you have practiced for your lifetime. If you want to create for yourself a new capability, you need to change your practices. And then instead of being a creature of drift, where my tomorrow is just a repetition of yesterday, we change our practices in these domains, somatics, emotions, and language. And we begin to create a new body, a new presence, a new ability. And these are all domains that in our US culture that I'm more familiar with, people are not aware they have choices to train their body to be more aligned with their commitment than their reactions, to train their emotions, to be choices of how to deal with the situation, to choose the stories they're living in rather than be a victim of them. So this shows that leadership is a performance art, a full body performance art. And given that, what I'd like to do here is do another exercise. I want to go back to, as we're learning about generative leadership here, I want to go into one of the key questions of generative leadership for yourself. And it's a deepening of how we can listen to ourselves and listen to our clients. And let's do this in pairs again. And the question I'm going to ask you to explore is, what do I care about? And let me explain the experience we've had with care. Because it's a question that has not been emphasized in our, at least in the US, in our learning and in schooling, pretty much kids are taught that what they care about doesn't matter. And so what we find with our students who come into our programs, when we ask the question, what do you care about? That we tend to have one of two answers. One is, I care about everything, or I care about my family. Of course, you love them. Or I don't really know. And finding the care, the kind of care we're looking for, is that deep care inside of you that has to do with purpose, that has to do with, this is my path in my life. This is my meaning in my life. My care is what reveals it to me. We find that our students, we give them this question. This question is not a question for answering well. It's a question that you'll live with for the rest of your life. I invite you now to take the question, what do you care about, as a foundational place to look at yourself and what other people care about. And it can change. It will evolve over time. It's a question to ask every day. Where am I with my care? Am I connected to it? Because if you're not connected to your care, you're sacrificing your aliveness in some way. And so by having you start this conversation of what do I care about, it's not a performance. You don't have to have an answer. We find that our students take 6 to 12 months to really begin to have a clear answer, regardless of our age. It's the rare person who's clear about it. And some people take longer. But as we said, your care is fundamental to knowing what is valuable to you, what is satisfying to you, what is meaningful to you, and for your clients. So just take a look at where you're at with the question as a beginning of your relationship, not just with the question, but with your care and how it can support you and your life. We actually, in generative leadership, think of action as taking care, because action without care is just activity. It has no value. So we want to transform action into taking care. And when you're coaching your leaders and clients and organizations, you want to help them create action that is taking care of something they care about, that the team has a care. That makes work valuable and meaningful rather than simply going through the grind. So let's pair up. Let's do a short conversation, 5 minutes, and we'll come back, check in, and we'll do a final thrust here at this world of generative leadership and open for Q&A. Rock and roll, have fun. All right, welcome back. Hi, Tens. So does anyone have a question or a share from?
I have something to share. This I care, is it not something time space dependent? Number one question is that. Second one is, as a senior leader, as a CEO, what you care may be different from what the company wants you to care. Because you're paid for it. You're paid mega bucks to be a CEO. So it doesn't matter what you care. What matters to me is what the company wants you to care. Just answer me these two questions.
Okay. So let's take the first question. Are we limited by time and space? Yes, you're alive now. You're alive in this world. You're alive in this body. And you are in the situation that you're in. And so the care, there's two elements to care that we've discovered over the year. One is there is that deep care that is inside you, that you were born with. Some traditions would say that defines your destiny. That's what you're about. That's why you were put on the planet. And then there's, how do I take that care and deal with the world? Deal with the world the way it is. That's the leadership challenge, is integrating those two. And that's also the framework for your second question. When we say my care doesn't matter because I'm paid only to produce results, we kind of turn ourselves into the machine for results. And so the question I would ask a CEO in that situation is, doesn't anything matter to you? Is it only the result game? How do you bring yourself to have ownership in that game with your care? Because if you disconnect from your care, you produce a certain level of lack of full ownership, and you're going to be producing a culture that has the same issue. And so that's often where people are stuck when their interpretation of work is sacrifice for the paycheck. That's all I'm doing, right? But when you're there, the question, what do I care about? It doesn't mean that there's a competition between my situation and me off to my care. How do I bring my care to my work? And so for teams, I gave the examples before. What do we care about? What are the aspects of being a team that are already there that we can take care of? How about our personal growth while we're in our work? Is that something we want to care about? Excellence, is that something we want to care about? How about producing an impact in the world? Do we want to care about it? And leadership is part of exploring those conversations. What I would say of our explorations over the years with generative leadership is when you're disconnected from your care, you are disconnected from huge opportunities for you and for the people around you. And in our framework, work is not simply sacrifice to get things done. Work is a place where people create the future together. Then let's create a future we care about in what we do and how we do it. And then you get incredible ownership, incredible energy into the organization. I think that's part of the leadership challenge. And the fact that we're producing a product doesn't mean we're just limited to the product, because we're with people in what we do and how we do our work. And that's always available to us to bring our care. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me just do a couple of more. Oh, Rajesh, please.
So if there is a leader, and if there is a leader who basically cares for himself or herself.
Yes.
So like there are degrees of selflessness and selfishness. So I'm talking about a leader who is little more selfish than the average.
Yes.
Who's, when you ask that person, what do you care about? The person would say, I care about myself. Even if the person would not say it, it reflects in the demeanor and the actions.
Yes.
So what do you do to such a leader?
When
will this care produce the desired results? Because that person is caring for only himself or herself.
my experience in the organizational world, Rajesh, with that kind of leader is they can only thrive in an organization that doesn't have to change. Everything's just kind of processized and the revenue is good. It's amazing. The companies are making really good revenue, often have very bad leadership inside because the money allows the indulgence of that. But the question is, if I only care about myself, that will produce an impact with the people around you. They won't respect you. They won't take ownership. That they will be reactive to you. You probably are also going to be in a mode of using people, if not threatening them. There will be a limit to the excellence and the success of the organization. And if you begin to see what healthy leadership is, healthy leaders receive because they give, not because they take. And that principle opens up a new door. You want to take care of yourself? Take care of other people first. But don't give up taking care of yourself, because many leaders have the opposite problem. They sacrifice themselves so much that they burn out. And that's the opposite problem. Both extremes are missing the possibility of creating new value and deep value. And this takes us to the blind spot that I believe is common in our culture of what is a good life. My question for us is, what is a good life? And are you taking care of living a good life? And that doesn't depend on the external circumstance. It has to do with your internal conversations. What is living a good life? It's discovering what you care about and taking care of it, because then you get value, satisfaction, and meaning. Rajesh's question is about someone who has a very limited interpretation of what they care about. And that's incompatible with the purpose of leadership. These leaders sometimes rise to the top, but they face the challenge that their organization, because of the culture they're going to create, their organization is probably not going to be a leader of excellence.
So so what you say is exactly the issue sometimes. Like you said, if the company is doing well, maybe because the industry is doing well, or you're at the right place at the right time and things are going well,
Yeah.
despite bad leadership. It
Exactly.
becomes, since the corporates are basically into making money, the goal is making money. Of course, there are other goals, but basically it's making money. Most of the corporates, it becomes
Yes.
all the more difficult to kind of bring changes in the leadership because everything is
can.
hunky dory, and
Yeah.
the bottom line is it's all, everything's fine. So I mean, why do you need to change? You need to fix something which is not broken. The company is doing well. It's making money. It's
Yes.
growing.
Yes. For the person who has an ambition for leadership, who sees that things could be better, this is still an opportunity. When that story is being told, every individual has a chance to adopt that story or have a different story. And the way to build power in the organization for a different culture is to perform. Sometimes we think we're only here to make money is automatically a sacrificial negative situation. But if we're innovating, if we're creating good lives for customers, if we're creating good lives for employees, that makes money too. There is another way to go into the future with positive virtues. And these positive virtues are the ones that produce leaders with innovation and going beyond simply times are good and we don't need to worry about it. And so this is a chance for every individual leader to examine what game are they playing, what is their ambition, and what impact do they want to have from their leadership. Because we're all leaders, we all contribute to creating the future with others. From that point of view, we can all ask the question, what is the impact of my leadership? And what would be satisfying to me, not just with the money that is going on, but with creating a good life. The good life theme is one that we have found is very important for people who burn out. They don't know how to bring life into the work. And the good life theme is also a foundational theme for creating value and can be an opportunity. So for the people who are leaders that are resigned as coaches, there are some coaches that they're not ready for you. That may be too big a challenge for that particular leader. But for another leader in the same organization who sees changes they want to make, they are going to be open and ready. And what is the success strategy? The success strategy for your individual career, the success strategy for a leader, the success strategy for an organization, the success strategy for a coach is make bigger promises, create bigger value through action. And from the generative point of view, you can do that in any situation. How are we doing, Rajesh?
Good.
So we can't win every game, but we can find places where people want to win and help them. The other opportunity as a coach with a negative leader, sometimes they're so in love with their own strategy, they won't listen. But sometimes the contribution we make to people is to create a breakdown for them by saying, you're a bad leader. And, if that matters to you, and sometimes you can create a situation where they might even listen to you. Sometimes they need to be woken up that they have a choice. Okay, let me open for other questions. We have 10 minutes.
So one question for you, Bob, again, MG here.
Yes.
These days, leaders are short-lived. Like you have CEOs who preside over an organization for 2 to 3 years, and
Yeah.
they get sacked or they move on.
Yeah, it's
Senior leaders do the same thing. The great old, I came from an organization called the Indian Railways, where I worked for 22 years.
wow.
The loyalty to an organization and growing as a leader in the organization may be a thing of the past, especially the current Generation Z, who
Yeah.
do look at jobs and careers very differently from what we did.
Yes.
In this context, do you think a leader has a real challenge in aligning his value, his care, to the organizational care? Because he's a paid guy, right? And so where does the people, like you said about good life, in the 3 years he is the CEO, is he more focused on creating earning per share for the company or good life for the employees? Just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So your question actually creates a duality that they're opposite.
Yeah.
Am I going to share the value of the shares, or am I going to create a good life? I propose to you, they're not opposed. You can do both. And in fact, by creating a good life for employees, they can contribute more to the success. When you see, an organization is people. That's where we started this whole conversation. It's people. It's human beings. It's life. If we root our leadership there, then action produces results. You see, the whole question, are we going to go to the share price, is already making, am I going to be a machine, or are we going to deal with human beings? I have found that when you allow human beings to get in touch with their humanity, their power to choose, their ability to create value instead of be a cog in the machine, the actual numbers of the organization are better than if you made them into machines. So this is not a contest between, are we going to be only people or only profit? They go together when you can harness the creativity, the commitment, the ownership, the shared care of people. That's our experience. Beautiful.
Bob, we are running out of time. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, and I wanted to give Ajit a couple of minutes if we can. Do we have time?
Yeah.
So good. So everybody take a deep breath. We went on a journey. Hopefully the eyes you see your world with are different eyes now than when we started 2 hours ago. That was our ambition. So I want to introduce Ajit, who's the Director of Corporate Solutions for IGL India. And I want to thank you so much again for the honor and privilege and pleasure of being in this conversation with you.
Thank you, Bob. It was a lovely session. So here's something that I would like to announce. Bob and Samir have recently written a book which is titled as The Power of Owning Up. This book is being released on the 15th of December, and it will be available on Amazon. On the 15th, this book is being sold on Amazon for a 20% discount. After that, it is not there. The 20% discount is not there. So I would request you to please buy this book. This is a very powerful book. It really shakes us up in terms of understanding our responsibility. So I would request all of you to buy this book. The second thing that I would like to leave behind is we run many programs in IGL, and one of our master programs, if I would say the flagship program for IGL, is Coaching Excellence in Organizations. Now, this program is a 3-year program. I have just shared the leaflet or the brochure in the chat box. So request you to download the same. And I will not talk too much about it. I'll be available through ICF, and you can connect with us, and we can talk more about this program as your interest lies. So do buy the book and do come back for this program. This is a lovely program, and I got into this program 3 years back, and I can only tell you it's completely changed my life. So I would request you to all join, because it really adds value in what we offer to the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ajit, and thank you, Bob, for that lovely session. Very deep thoughts to reflect. I request Raj to give his closing remarks.
Thanks, Natarajan. Bob and Ajit, thank you so much for being here. Bob, I wouldn't even know how to start to kind of summarize that. You took us on a journey. It was truly so much to reflect on. I'm just going to highlight some of the things that stood out for me, starting from questions like what it means to be human, and leaving out with a question saying, what is a good life? And on the way, what do we care about? Being the connect, purpose being the connect between the care and the treatment. So much to think about. And from a coaching perspective, again, the idea of blind spots and the OR model to make sure that you are seeing with the right eyes, opening up for blind spots, the accountability you can bring to our clients using the accountability and commitment model that you called out. There was so much to take away, and thanks for sharing that brochure, Ajit. I'm sure folks on this call will be looking forward to learning more, and we're definitely going to be looking at your book on the 15th. I want to thank everyone who stayed on for the 2 hours today. This has been one of our most well-attended sessions, and the fact that 2 hours into the call, we still have 40+ people, Bob, is just a testimony to your ability to connect. So thank you for that. Want to leave one closing remark for all those who joined us from chapters across different cities, and do look forward to our session, the Coaches Coffee Connect, which is our last session for the year for ICF Chennai, is on the 28th. Do look out for an invitation for that. And thank you. Good night and good day to wherever you are. Natarajan, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Raj. Thank you, Bob and Ajit, for accepting our invitation. It was a fantastic session. The feedback form has been shared in the chat box. Please give your feedback. And also the CCU passcodes have been shared. If you want a CCU to be processed, please enter those CCUs in the feedback form. And looking forward to seeing you all in the 28th December in our Coaches Coffee Connect.
Just wanted to add, Natarajan, we always try to give extended learning opportunities to participants who come by. We saw that in the ICF India Conclave as well. So we have requested IGL and Ajit, if it's possible to have a special offer to this program to make it more accessible to our participants. As and when something gets worked out, we'll be very happy to share it with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Raj, Natarajan, and not to forget PMC, who started this journey with ICF Chennai. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And we would love to be back with whatever we can help you with. Thank you so much.